1 2 1 2 test 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 testing 1 2 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 test 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 testing 1 2 1 2 2 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2 1 2 3 testing test. Test, testing 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2 test testing 1 2 1 2 1 2 testing. Testing 1 2 1 2 test 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 testing 1 2 1 2 test testing 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2. Testing 1 2 1 2 on the handheld 1 2 on the handheld test 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2.
There we go. I was afraid the words were going to appear on the screen and I was going to have to start singing along with them. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Web Design World 2006, San Francisco. I'm Jim Hyde. I'm the conference chair for the event. It's been my pleasure to help to do the editorial planning of the event, to plan the sessions, and to work with our fabulous array of speakers who we have here today. And just going to go through a couple of quick announcements before I kick things off and introduce our keynoter. First, a quick show of hands. How many of you are frequent lizards? Who have you been to past Thunder Lizard events? A lot of you. That's fabulous. Thank you. Welcome back. This is a little bit bigger a venue than we usually do them in. They're usually in hotel ballrooms, and I kind of wish I'd brought my Segway because everything is kind of a long way away. I don't really have a Segway. However, thank you for coming. And I just want to go through some of the announcements. We are in kind of general session mode for the first couple of sessions of the day. Then we turn this room into 2 rooms. And on the other side of the room today, we'll be talking design and typography. On this side, we'll be talking interface design. And as you look at your schedule over the next couple of days, basically in the table, the sessions on your right are in your room on your right as you enter the rooms. Lunch is on us today and Wednesday. We're on our own for lunch tomorrow, but today and Wednesday, hope you'll join us for our networking lunch, which is to your left and to your left again. You'll see the big sign, lunch, and you'll see all the food. And the restrooms are about 20 minutes that way. So you may actually kind of want to plan your visit, 20 minutes from, I better start now. You may have also seen on the slides, also printed in your conference binder, there's no need to look for it now, is a URL to the the virtual conference site where we will be posting updated presentations from all of our speakers. And about 2 to 3 weeks from now, we will also have posted on the virtual conference site streaming video and audio of all the sessions. So if you're agonizing over which session to attend when we're in 2-track mode, don't sweat it too much because you can always listen to the session and watch it once you get back to the office, once we get those files posted in a few weeks. And the video will be the screen images of what the presenters are showing, along with, obviously, their audio. And then finally, just a couple of quick no-nos. If you're welcome to take flash photography, you're welcome to take flash photos. No, you're not. You're welcome to take photos. If you're as much of a Flickr addict as I am, you probably will want to, but please turn off your flash because it's kind of a deer-in-the-headlights distraction for our speakers. And similarly, anything that makes noise, cell phones, pagers, implants, beepers of any kind, please set them on vibrate, pinch, or polite mode in one way or another. Thank you. And you have our permission to glare at any attendees whose cell phones go off during the session. And with that, I'm going to kick things off by introducing our keynote speaker. We're going to be talking a lot in this side today, and really in the conference in general, and indeed on day 3 as well, about what a lot of people are calling Web 2.0. And we're hearing that phrase tossed out a lot. We're hearing AJAX tossed out a lot. We're hearing rich internet applications in a context that does not necessarily involve Macromedia Flash tossed out a lot. And that is, it's hot stuff. And it's one reason that we have added a lot of new sessions to address it this time around. And we're going to start with our keynoter. He is Jeffrey Veen. He has been at this for well over a decade now, and dating back to the original hotwire.com site. And now as principal of Adaptive Path, the legendary user experience consultancy based here in the city. He's been involved with a lot of fabulous high-profile sites like Blogger, like Flickr, Typepad, Creative Commons. And I'm not only thrilled to introduce him as a keynote speaker, but I'm also thrilled that he's doing a half-day workshop for us on day 3 because he's a fabulous speaker. So please say good morning to Jeffrey Veen.
Thanks, Jim. Oh, yes, sir. Good morning, everybody. That was a very generous introduction. I'm standing in the back just kind of laughing, picturing Jim Hyde on a Segway. Any of you familiar with the show Arrested Development? I love how on that show they tried to take the dorkiest character and tried to, how could we turn up the dorkiness a notch? So they gave him a Segway to ride around on the show. No, I mean that in the best possible way, Jim. Well, hey, thanks for making it all the way up here to the 3rd floor. I've never been here at Moscone West. It's giant and fascinating to be over here, watching them build it here in San Francisco over the past few years. And thanks for not stopping on the second floor, because I know how compelling the Middleware Summit must have been to all of you. I'm sorry, I joke a little bit. I apologize. So Jim mentioned Web 2.0. And I got to push button number 1. I'm wondering, how many of you feel fairly sort of comfortable with this term? You know, sort of, you've heard it. Let me just see a quick show of hands. I'm sorry if you apologize. So, okay. So only about half of you. That's great, because, man, there's a lot of content over the next few days here at this conference about Web 2.0. How many of you, let me ask one more question. How many of you feel like Web 2.0 is less a descriptive term of what's happening now, more a bunch of marketing hype and maybe a bunch of people trying to start a new bubble? Anybody here? Yeah, great. Because I'm kind of feeling the cynicism myself, too, having been watching it for a little while here. So what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about the hype and the bubble, but also see what we can sort of deconstruct out of that and apply to the stuff we're doing today, so that we can kind of maybe learn a little bit from the mistakes of the past, use that as a foundation for what we're building now, and maybe be a little more optimistic about the future. So I want to start by looking at talking about bubbles a little bit. In the 17th century, there was a tulip bubble, tulip mania in the Netherlands. Apparently, the bulbs had never been there before. The folks that were trading sort of hooked up with some people in the Ottoman Empire in Turkey, brought these tulip bulbs over, and one of the first things that happened is they caught a virus, and they turned into these amazing, brilliant colors that had never been seen before. Caused a craze, right? They were the market, the trade for tulip bulbs went literally out of control. The kind of boom and bubble that we can't even imagine, even having been through one ourselves about 5 years ago. A single bulb would often sell for as much as 6 years' salary for the average worker. People were trading their land and their homes, speculating on if they bought these bulbs, they could sell them again and get rich quick. It didn't go so well, as you can imagine. The whole thing fell apart, it sort of destroyed the economy in the Netherlands, and made, frankly, most of Western Europe, very apprehensive for 150, 200 years for looking for innovation and ways in which to grow the economy. Same thing has happened in our country countless times. 200 years later, in the 19th century, the railroad boom was a classic example of technological innovation, right? James Watt invented the steam engine to a point where, with a variety of other technologies converging on one point, they were able to sort of change the way goods and services were distributed in the country. Technological innovation led to a tremendous amount of wealth pouring in, which in turn led to a redistribution of wealth and changed the fabric of society, and also crashed just as big afterwards. That one managed, because of the sort of innovations that were there, to keep going, but it followed the same cycle. Likewise, not just the technology, but the way in which we produce technology, making technology accessible to people is what Henry Ford did with his Model T. By creating the assembly line, technological innovation, again, distribution of wealth. A lot of people speculated on that. A lot of people got very rich, and also a lot of people went through another bust. We saw that in a purely abstract form of wealth being assigned to information. And that's where the sort of stock market boom happened in the 20s and early 30s, where suddenly trading on the market was as easy as slipping pieces of paper back and forth, as pure information, rather than goods moving back and forth. And that created one of the biggest generations of wealth that there ever were, and frankly, one of the biggest busts when that all came apart that this country has ever seen. And it's not just our country. It happened in real estate in Japan with speculation back in the 80s, when the few acres that the royal temple, the imperial temple, sat in the center of Tokyo was worth more than all the real estate in North America for a while. It's crazy, right? But again, lots of speculation, lots of wealth being made, and a big boom that followed afterwards. So we have precedent for what we went through. For our sort of Web 1.0, our tremendous amount of technological innovation that caused industry to retool, right? Every single industry had to suddenly retool for our technology. And a lot of people got very wealthy in a very short amount of time, and then the big bust happened, just like it has time after time after time. And that's kind of where we found ourselves a couple years ago. Somebody sent me this comic, or the cartoon, that they drew a few years ago, and I absolutely love it. It shows sort of 1994, when the new technology is sort of just starting to hit a mainstream, right? A technology that had been around for almost 25 years before that, but was slowly starting to popularize because of convergence of some technologies. Through 96 and 98, man, it grew like crazy. It was so much fun. 99 was a spectacular year on the web. It was the future was as bright as you could imagine, and then suddenly it all came down, right? 2000, everybody I knew got laid off from their jobs, and San Francisco dramatically changed. I don't know about your town, but we could suddenly get tables at restaurants and things like that. But 2001 was a disaster. It was literally like the future of the web was totally uncertain. In fact, saying that you were a web designer caused people to sort of roll their eyes and say, oh, a latte drinking, goatee wearing, whatever. Right. It was a bad time. But from that, the little shoots came up out of the ashes, right, in 2003. And so we've seen little applications start to spawn, little applications that you'll see here in the next few days with people sort of not really speculating, but saying, all right, there's no reason why I can't keep doing what I've always been doing. Maybe not at the same scale. Let's get back to work and let's start experimenting some more. And that's what I want to talk about, is how this collection of little sprouts that people are sort of calling Web 2.0 now, how that collection of little ideas that are starting to build, that we're starting to build, is again converging. Web 2.0 is a term that came from Tim O'Reilly of O'Reilly Publishing, the folks that make all the books with the animals on them. He and Dale Doherty, one of his senior editors there, were in a meeting planning a conference that they were going to be doing. And Dale threw out this term, Web 2.0, as taking what we learned from the last web and sort of retooling it for where we are today. Now, it's so easy, especially when you have a term as memorable and as accessible as Web 2.0, for people to jump right on it and say, it's the next big thing. And this time it's got XML plus the thing and the other thing you should invest now. And that's what happens, right? It happened with push media and with Java and with everything else. And that's a shame, because there's a tremendous amount of interesting stuff that's in there. This is what Tim O'Reilly produced out of that meeting, which is called a meme map. It's all over the web. It's on Flickr. You can find it there. Search for Web 2.0 meme map. And it's a whole bunch of just ideas that they threw together to try to make sense of what was going on. There's some really good stuff here. The web as a platform, right? The idea that you control your own data at the websites that you travel to. Services, not packaged software. Architecture, participation. These are all things that we see being exploited in the tools that are coming out today. And of course, none of them are even remotely new. This is the foundation of the web. It is just a time in which they're sort of becoming up to the surface beyond sort of all the new and oh my God, we need a homepage excitement and fear of the last time around. So what I hope we can do today is take a look at some of these trends, some of the stuff that you see up here on this list, like trusting your users, radical trust like Wikipedia has, or the idea of taxonomies built by users through tagging, things like that. I want to take some of those things and put them in a framework that I've been using for a few years now. It's a framework that was developed by one of my partners at Adaptive Path. His name is Jesse James Garrett, and he wrote a book about this called The Elements of User Experience. These elements are a framework that we have used to evaluate sort of web products or the companies that have produced these web products to see sort of where the problems lie. Right? What are they struggling with, and how can we sort of take the levels, the layers, the elements of these experiences that people are trying to create, kind of deconstruct them, see what they are at their basic, what their basic problems are, and try to fix them. Well, the same likewise can be true of evaluating a new sort of trend or technology, and that's what I hope to do today, is to take this idea of Web 2.0, all those little shoots that are coming up out of the ashes, let's stick them on a framework like this and see what problems they're trying to solve and see how well they're doing them and see what we can learn from them. So let me take you through these elements a little bit of introduction to them. The surface, we're going to start kind of go bottom up from here, right? So the surface of a website are the pixels that show up on the screen. These are the typefaces that a designer chooses, the colors, the icons, the various page elements, the way they're visually designed to give a site a look and feel. We're going to talk a lot about the implications of building trust through this very almost superficial layer of how a site looks. Because as we're going to see, right, a site can look a variety of different ways with the same data set underneath. This is I put this up as a great example of the surface of a site changing radically. It's a redesign that I worked on about 2 years ago with Doug Bowman of Stop Design, who's here as well. We'll be speaking later today. And he and I took Blogger, the blog authoring software, after they were acquired by Google, and changed it from their notion of sort of efficient and effective FTP into a publishing tool that anybody could use very simply and very easily. And the Surface had an awful lot to do with that, to give it a much friendlier feel, much more inviting and engaging. So we're going to take a look at a lot of that coming up here. The skeleton of a website is the next layer, and that's the arrangement of the interactive items on a page. All right, so the things on the page that communicate to your users what they can do there and how that works and how they can accomplish their goals. Boy, there's a lot changing here, right? And the way our pages interact with our users and vice versa. I look at the sign right outside for all the stuff that's happening today, and I think about 2/3 of it has the word Ajax in it. There's a lot going on here, and we'll take a look at some of that. The next layer is the structure of a website. And this is traditionally, it's as much tradition as we have on the web, so traditionally the information architecture of a website, the arrangement of the stuff in your site in a way that is easy to communicate to people so that they can find their way through your website, to find the things they're looking for, to get their goals accomplished while they're there. This is navigation design. This is the overall, again, structure of the website. This is where we'll dig into tagging and some of the new sort of ways sites are emerging their structure over time based on data they never anticipated having. Above that is the scope of the website. This is the stuff that you decide to do versus the stuff you decide not to do. Right? This is the key points on your site when you say, like, we're going to compete against our competitors here on our website with the following features. Right? This is a place where lots of websites I see sort of aren't as explicit as they could be. They want to either do everything, they're not doing nearly enough online, they haven't made the leap over into the interactive applications that can help them communicate effectively with their customers. Think about like the different online banking systems that are out there. It's remarkable the difference in scope between all of them. So we'll take a look at how that's also been changing with these latest trends that are out there. And strategy is the last one. Why are these companies online? And vice versa, what are they learning from being online that can feed back into their organization? Fundamental change in what people are expecting out of companies now that the web has sort of matured a little bit in these last 10 years. Fundamental change in what people expect out of companies. And looking at the strategy of an organization through this lens can help us learn an awful lot. So Surface Skeleton Structure Scope Strategy is sort of our roadmap for today and for the next hour or so. I want to sort of take us through this and look at some of the trends that are there. That's the book that Jesse wrote. And, you know, if some of the stuff I say resonates with you today, I encourage you to pick it up. And not just because Jesse's my partner and my good friend, but also it'll make a fantastic gift for your boss, I've found. So let's dig into some of this stuff. And let's start with the surface of the website. And I thought a good way to sort of explain what I'm talking about with the surface here is to take a look at a very simple design problem and how that design problem evolves over time and how we solve little parts of that problem through the surface, the skin, the pixels that are going to show up and explain to people what the content is. So I've got some data here. It is as raw as data can be. My goal with this data, the design problem I want to solve, is to make this data turn into information for people. That means take the data and make it usable so that people can take it and do something with it. The step beyond that is to take that information that we've created and turn it into knowledge so that it changes who they become and what they know. Right? And so we have taken a design problem from its core, from this raw data, all the way through to changing somebody and empowering them to act on it. So we're going to start with this. What do you think this is? What can we tell about this data? Well, it's not much, frankly. Everything appears to be under 10 and goes out to 2 decimal places. Anybody want to guess what this is? Nobody has any idea. It could be a lot of things, right? It could be the stock price of a particular company over time. Could be some kind of medical record. It could be, I don't know, oxygen content of your blood or something. I don't know. It's hard to say. So the first thing we would have to do as designers is take our implicit understanding of this data and simply express it to people. And so that's what I've done, right? This is the average rainfall of some cities in the United States measured in inches per month over 12 months. Great. We've already explained that data. We've added sort of a layer to this data, some metadata to it to help explain what it is. And I've labeled, arranged things a little bit, but really not done more than that. But I think we can make this more usable and more accessible. I'm a huge fan of Edward Tufte, the work that he has done in information design, explaining information in a truthful and sort of honest manner. So the first thing I do is sort of give it the Tufte look, right? Recede the information that's not as important. So the labels, while they help in explaining the information, they aren't the information. So this makes it a little bit more usable, right? A typeface that is a little easier to access, a little easier to sort of look through than the one I'd used before. So I've added some amount of usability to that. But I think we could take it a little farther, right? I think we can make this data a little more accessible to people. I can change the saturation of a background color on each one of the cells based on the value of that data. I can tie the visual design into that data. So now you can glance at this and go, oh, well, if I want to go to San Francisco on vacation, summer is good. But if I want to have a dry vacation, I should probably stay out of Miami in those months, right? Instantly, we can kind of see that. So this, I think, we've made a lot more usable, right? I'm sure there's a lot we could do to this design to make it even better. I don't consider myself at all a visual designer, but there's some principles, at least, that we can apply to make this happen. Let's see if we can take this one step farther and make it even more accessible on the surface here. What do you think of that? Is that better? Is it more accessible or less accessible? I don't know. It totally depends on what I understand about my audience. If my audience were a room full of meteorologists, they'd be like, go back one, or in fact, go back two, right? But what if my audience for this is somebody that's quickly browsing through a trip planner on Expedia.com and is trying to decide when should we do our vacation? We're going to these cities, and we throw this up, and they go, well, it looks like the West Coast, San Francisco, Seattle looks good in the summertime. For example, who knows? So it might be in that particular context when somebody's kind of racing through a whole bunch of data, is not interested at all in trends or specifics around the data. Maybe this is a little more accessible. Maybe it's not. It's hard to say, right? Maybe there is another visual design that could take the data out, leave a representation of it, and make it better. But I tell you, this is a dangerous sort of ground to tread, right? USA Today, for example, is kind of notorious for taking information and making it so accessible that it means nothing. Here's a great example. Yeah, the driest summers in the Southeast. They're not arranged by date. It tells us that, what was it, 1980 was pretty dry. A little bit drier than 1954. But what knowledge are we pulling out of this? What information are we putting into action with a page like this? And how about this one? I don't even know what this one is saying. Coolest summer in the Southeast was in 1967. And then there were other years, I guess. I don't know. It's easy to make fun of USA Today for pushing so far on making information accessible that they sort of obfuscate the information that they're trying to give to people. In fact, there's a number of sort of parodies of this. I love the way The Onion does this. They always have their little information graphic, which takes a very sort of well-designed and nice-looking chart of information with literally no information at all. Here we're finding out that in 1995, in outer space discoveries, if you point the Hubble telescope at the Earth, you can see girls changing. Yeah, that's great. Or rollerblade rage, right? Here, the trend in rollerblades, and we're finding 18% of people being barred from many shops and restaurants gives them a nice outsider feeling. So there's no information really being displayed here. There's no reason to show it as an information graphic, but they're sort of twisting this and saying how easy it is to sort of get off track with all of this. I love this note down in the corner, if you can read it. It says, the U.S. Safety Council reminds all skaters that helmets are for dorks. Anyway, so I don't know if this is better or if it's not better. It's hard to say. Again, that's sort of where we get into research and understanding our audience, and I think Kelly Goto is going to be talking a lot right after me about that sort of like understanding users and looking beyond just the superficial. But what's Web 2.0 about this stuff, or at least what can we see from those trends that starts to affect this layer of surface design? I wonder, like, if we would take it this direction, if we would make it what everyone's calling a rich internet application, if that might make it a little more useful so that people can take this information and turn it into knowledge. The thing that I like most about this is that it takes those same design principles and helps users sort of feel more trust for the data because they can play with it. And that's been a big trend that I've been seeing over the last year. It's taking data, giving it to users and saying, do whatever you want with it. right? Here's one particular rendering. Here's another. Here's all kinds of other ones. And you see that with every sort of new application coming out having an API, an interface into the data so users can take that data. So users start to trust the data. So here, I could put the same information up on the screen, let people see, sort of slide back and forth, see like, oh, wow, look at how the rain sort of changes to different parts of the country. I could add more data, frankly, data that I may not even own, right? I'm sure there's an API to average temperatures and other effects, like the other things that affect the data, the weather. I could let people choose their own cities. I don't have to take my design bias that I apply to the data and pass it through to my users. I can give them the tools to let them do that themselves. And that's what starts to build the trust. And one of the key sort of underpinnings of all this Web 2.0 thinking that's out there is the idea that we treat users as peers. There's no reason why anybody would have any sort of, that I shouldn't think of anybody in my audience as anything but an equivalent, a peer, somebody I want to collaborate with, rather than sort of traditional audience that I communicate messages to and they consume that. It's much different, sort of, not just turning the tables, but sort of leveling out the tables, and I find that absolutely fascinating. The problem is that creating trust on the surface is very, very difficult, right? We're still just talking about the pixels in the screen, the look and feel of a website. Look at this quote. This came out recently from a study by Dr. Giddy Lingard of the Carleton University. Their findings from their survey was that even if a website is highly usable and provides very useful information presented in a logical arrangement, this may fail to impress a user whose first impression of the site was negative. Isn't that powerful? No matter how good you do with all of the usability and all of the sort of information architecture, if the surface is wrong, people aren't going to trust the site. You know how they found this out? This is fascinating. So they took 50 different websites, and they showed them to users, and they didn't let them use them. They'd show it to the user and say, do you trust that site? What's your gut feeling? It reminds me of the Malcolm Gladwell book, Blink, if you've read that. What's your snap decision, your judgment? Did you trust that site you just saw? And they found by doing that with a bunch of different users that it lined up almost perfectly, that everybody trusted the same websites, didn't trust the other same websites. The thing that's so fascinating is that this is how long they showed each website. And everybody sort of, yeah, I trust that one. No, I don't trust that one. I can't really do a 20th of a second on this, but I'm going to show you a bunch of websites. Take a look at these. These are some from the study. So that's interesting. Which ones did you trust? I showed them to you for about a half a second each, I think. And I showed them to you all rapid fire, so it's hard to keep them all straight. But I certainly do. I make a value judgment about each one in that amount of time. So do your users for your website. So think of how important the visual design of a website is, right? To sort of build that trust immediately, to start off with that sort of head start. And that's what they found, right? Trust on the surface comes from visual appeal, comes from the way the site looks and feels. That's where the trust starts. If you don't have it, you're working uphill, no matter how usable your site is, no matter how much effort you put into all of that. It's the difference between cognition and emotion, right? We get an emotional response to every one of those. I heard a couple of chuckles when I saw when some of those websites went up there because they were so bad, right? And you instantly knew how bad they were. So those sites have a tremendous amount of work to do to connect what you know to be true to what you feel to be true. Because people see a website and they feel that's a good website. And they will work hard to connect what they feel with what they think as they start to use the site. As the site starts to either impress them or disappoint them, they're going to try to fit it back into what they immediately saw. It's sort of called the halo effect, right? A good visual design will give you that head start so that you can start to apply the usability principles, the information architecture principles, and everything else to make the experience complete. Likewise, a good visual design people will work at a really poor usability and interaction model. They'll work really hard at it to make it work until they finally are disappointed. So a good visual design is not going to solve your problems, but it's certainly going to give you the head start. So that's where trust comes from on the surface. If you want to read some more about this, there's some great work lately. Don Norman published a fantastic book called Emotional Design. Why We Love or Hate Everyday Things, where he takes a look at what are the qualities of products that we sort of have affinity for, regardless of how usable they are. And he's got this great juicer on the cover, which is absolutely beautiful. And he says he's got one in his kitchen, and he loves his juicer. Of course, it doesn't make juice, right? All it does is make a giant puddle on your countertop. But he loves it because it's so beautiful, and it's just, I want that in my home. I also wish I could make juice. BJ Fogg is another great place to get a little more depth on this, persuasive technology, using computers to change what we think and do. I particularly like what BJ does because he looks at both sides of the coin, how we can use good visual design, good design in general to manipulate people to do things that they hadn't intended to do. His classic example is the pop-up ad that looks like a dialogue box. Using design, right, to create a first impression that then you use to manipulate and cause behavior that people didn't expect. So a great couple of places to take a look at that. I'm going to loop back now and talk a little bit more about that connection with data, right? The surface connected to data, because what it comes down to in the world of the Web 2.0 is separation. A separation of content, data from its presentation, from its behavior, right? There's a tremendous amount happening in this space. Has been for a few years now. This is probably one of the first trends that emerged that really gave me sort of optimism for the future of web design. When we started to take a look at how you could take content and disassociate it from its presentation entirely, and all the benefits around that. And any of you using cascading style sheets in your work know exactly what I'm talking about. The tremendous benefits that you get from disassociating those. Right? So the Zen Garden is a perfect example from a few years back. This site sort of opened the eyes to a lot of people about how you could take content and literally apply skin after skin after skin to the same piece of content using technologies that have been in browsers forever, but are just sort of, at that point, recently coming into the forefront in terms of stability and popularity and being mainstream. So, the Zen Garden, this is the content behind it. Simple HTML with some paragraph tags, some divs, some class names, and that's it. But the things that people have done to this are absolutely phenomenal. There's some absolutely beautiful designs, all based on the exact same content, simply swapping out simply swapping out the style sheet. The complete separation of content and presentation, to the point where it becomes you can hardly recognize it. Somebody did this, taking Comic Sans and sort of positioning it in the bubbles of a comic strip. Unbelievable. Even this, right? Let's talk about trust again. So here's the sort of GeoCities 1996 version of the CSS Zen Garden. Really, really nice. Same content, just as accessible, just as searchable, findable in search engines, but connected to that same data. So if we come back to our thing that we were going to make, right, the weather data made more accessible in a rich internet application, we can see, right, that connection to the data helps us build the trust that we started to do with the visual design. It all comes back to that data. And that data can, frankly, come from anywhere. Right? We're no longer sort of just limited to the data that people have typed in or that we think we own that we're giving to data. We can mash data together from a variety of sources. I'll show you a couple examples of that in a minute. But the point is that users control their data, and they should. It's my data. I want to take it with me. I want to do whatever I want with it. And I appreciate you either aggregating it or putting a skin on it for me to make it more accessible, but it's my data. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the innovation that's happening at the skeleton, right? At the arrangement of interactive items on the page. I'm not going to say a ton about this because, like I said, I think the next 2 days are going to be absolutely filled with Ajax. But I did want to take you through some of the stuff that's happening right now. So on the layer of the skeleton in our big model here, we have typically drawn pictures of pages. This is what I did for many, many years in my career. Quick whiteboard sketch, take that into Visio, now OmniGraffle, thank God, to do some sort of interaction design. These are the elements that are going to be on the page. This is what happens when a user interacts with each one. And then off we go to the next page. It was really relatively simple. And then, right, we got to Ajax. And Ajax sort of turned the tables a little bit. It's ironic, right, because Ajax has always been around, almost as long as the browsers have, or at least some of the earlier browsers. The idea that you can take an asynchronous call back to the server using JavaScript and get, instead of a whole page back, XML. There are a variety of ways to do this, but it solves the problem that we typically had. The user would click, the server would process, the server would spit back a new page, the user would click, and on we would go. A new page for every single interaction that we did, no matter how tiny that interaction. Even if it was a password that you needed to try to enter, even if it was a tiny piece of data you wanted to update on the page, the entire page would come back with every time you clicked. Right? That led to sort of navigation paradigms where I would just simply want to log into the server, to the service that you're providing, and I go back and forth across 10, 15 pages just to make that happen. Think about like the checking out at an e-commerce website or finding a hotel room. Those sorts of experiences where we're going back and forth to the server, trying to find the right data that we're looking for. An experience that we just simply associated with the web. Yeah, the web's a little slow. It's a little bit clunky. It's not like desktop applications. But boy, you could do so much more. It's just such a blank canvas. Absolutely true. But then Ajax sort of popularized. And it came with this model that's much different, right? Click, click, click. I send to the server, and the server sends back little bits of data to update. So that when I'm interacting with the page, it's a much more fluid experience. This happened maybe 2 years ago when people started experimenting with this. Again, it had to do with the levels of people using modern sort of contemporary browsers, kind of reaching a place where it made sense to invest in these technologies, in this convergence of technologies. And some of the big notable examples were Google's Gmail, Google Mail, for that matter, where a big, giant internet service made it accessible to virtually everybody on the web, an interface, a web service that was built on this new model, right? And it sort of opened people's eyes. They're like, oh my God, what's going on here with all of this? So we've seen some great examples of that. I particularly like some of these very simple applications like you see coming out of 37 Signals. Here, it's just a to-do list, right? But it's done on the web. It's accessible from wherever you are, any computer you're in front of. It opens up all kinds of usability issues here. Like, how do we know what's editable? What on earth are all these little arrows about? How do we explain to people that something on the page has changed, that we haven't gone all the way around trip, but just a little piece of this has changed? A ton of usability issues. A whole sort of next step, as our poor users were just getting used to the way the web works. Now it's starting to work in much, much different ways. But frankly, that's why we're all here, right? Because, you know, we do design. We've solved problems. These are the problems we're going to be solving for the next couple of years. That's awesome. We have a lot of work to do. I want to show you another example of a rich internet app. It's not Ajax, but who cares? Because it works sort of in a way that's very, very compelling. This is a Flash application called Mapper that sits on top of the Flickr API, gets data by searching by tag. In this case, I search by sunset. It finds every image tagged sunset that is also tagged with a place name that matches their database. So here we found Mission Vallejo, California, has a beautiful sunset. But watch what happens if you start to search for some more abstract concepts. This I really, really like because it brings together this sort of new way that web apps are working along with this connection to the data. So I search for Route 66, and now I'm sort of surfing through a bunch of hits on that concept. And what's fascinating is that they literally follow Route 66. But Flickr has no idea what Route 66 is. None. Like a bunch of users took a bunch of photos and tagged them with this series of characters, Route 66. And Mapper, no idea what Route 66 is until it associates them with place names, maps those place names on this visualization, and shows us a photo journey of a bunch of people traveling through the center of the country. And that's really, really fascinating connection to that data, right? And this shows design taking sort of two turns, right? First, it is that rich interaction back and forth. We never reloaded a page, right? All this happened right inside of the first interface that we loaded, fraught with some, again, usability issues. What happens to the back button, and how do I bookmark this particular visualization? Sure, right? But it is an interesting way of spinning design around on the web into being a much more fluid and interactive experience. And the second thing it does is it connects users to their data. They can play with data. They can play with other people's data. They can mix data together. And this Route 66 example is a perfect one. Now, I showed you a couple of sort of very quick interaction designs when I started, right? The whiteboard sketch and then the sort of the schematic. That's changing too. And that's one of the difficulties I've come across as a designer myself working with Ajax-like technologies, with a lot of designers that I've spoken to, which is the problem with documentation and how teams are starting to have to work more closely together. I call this a problem, but frankly, I think it's a blessing in disguise. Getting teams to work more closely together rather than simply throwing schematics over the wall for some engineer to go build, but instead sort of getting together and figuring out, because now every single click that happens has a series of interactions that could go in any direction. This, from an application that I've been working on, is simply editing text in line. These are the, 10 8 steps, the 8 possible states that it can be in, and what we want to have happen in every one. And I'm probably forgetting 3 or 4 because we haven't built it and started playing with it yet. Bill Scott at Yahoo, he's at Yahoo right now, has done some really, really good work around storyboarding and visualizing rich internet applications through a storyboard. So here you can see editing the title of a photo and the steps that he goes through. In fact, he makes his deliverables interactive, so you can click on each one and you can see the state of the application as he clicks through. So it's going to take a change in the way we communicate about design in order to affect a lot of this. So let's move on to structure. The organization of our websites, the information architecture, the navigation of our websites. Oh my gosh, is this changing? It's taken a really sort of radical shift from the sort of top-down way we had traditionally labeled our websites, right? If you think about the Yahoo hierarchy of categories that Yahoo started with, you think about Amazon's tabs at the top of the page, very top-down. These are the categories that you start with and drill down from there, and becoming much, much more bottom-up with the structure of our websites. Let me give you an example of this. It's a little abstract. Bear with me here. This is my documents folder on my Macintosh. It's where I put all the stuff that I make. So I create a document, and I have traditionally, I'm doing this less so more and more, but traditionally would put it in one of these folders. And these folders, probably, I probably should have taken a really close look at what I have up there before I shared it with everybody. I think that looks all right. But traditionally, I would take that document and I would put it in a folder and possibly a subfolder under that, and I would organize it sort of top down. Right? Well, that's really changing now that rich, powerful search technologies are making on the desktop with Spotlight on the Mac or the MSN deal that they have on the PC or the Google desktop search. Allows me to, frankly, now I just mostly throw stuff in the documents folder, give it a good name so I can find it later. And here's a good example. This is a project that the code name was Millhouse. I search for Millhouse's every document, every chat, every event on my calendar, everything just shows up like perfect. That's what I wanted. Sort by date, sort by type. Awesome. So I'm doing less and less filing and more tagging of my documents, right? And I see this in web applications all the time. Delicious is one of my particular favorite ones. It's a social bookmarking application. I'm sure a number of you are familiar with this. As I surf the web, I find stuff I want to keep track of. And instead of making a bookmark and sticking it in one of my folders in my bookmark menu and figuring out exactly where it should go, I simply hit a bookmarklet. A little JavaScript window pops up so that I can say, yeah, this URL, here's a couple of notes, and here are the tags. This is what it's about. And you can see the tags that I've tagged my bookmarks down the side. I am creating an architecture out of the use of the system. When I started, I had none. As I used it, instead of creating individual slots to put stuff, I just say, this is about blogs, this is about design. And you can see it running down the side here, right? There's accessibility, blogs, design, and cycling have a lot. I can drill into one of these. So here I've clicked on blog. These are just the ones that I've tagged with blog. But I've also tagged them with a bunch of other stuff because no one bookmark fits in one folder, right, in one spot. I want to sort of say it's about this and this and this so that I can see the intersections later. And I could click on any one of those related tags and see all the bookmarks that I've tagged blog that are also about design. And it would come back with 2 entries. And those would be the ones, right? And that's a really powerful way of organizing my own information, right? On the fly, I go back and refactor these occasionally. Like I say, you know what, there's more about this stuff now and less about this. So I move everything that was typically in JavaScript, and much of it has come out and gone in the Ajax category. You know, stuff like that. Over time, I kind of tweak that a little bit. But what's the most interesting about all of this is if you look at that column that's labeled related tags, at the bottom of that, it says, show me everything tagged blog by all users. So I can take my personal system of navigation that I've created on the fly over time and connect it up with everybody else who's out there and start looking at those wonderful coincidences, those connections that I have with everybody else. And the entire architecture of the site is built on those connections and coincidences. Right? So if I click that, here's everything that's been tagged blog, and there's the top related tags, and I can start to see those intersections. So I can find everyone who has tagged something blog and something RSS, and find a subset of the Delicious users that are interested in blogging and RSS, which I'm interested in too. And I can see them there, and I can subscribe to them and get them to start feeding bookmarks into my queue. Absolutely fascinating way of building an architecture, an entire information architecture and navigation system completely out of what people do on the site. And see an application of that to a big commercial website. Look at Amazon. When's the last time you clicked on a tag? You find something you might be interested in, and the typical navigation pattern after that is following what other people were interested in, what they eventually bought after looking at this, and a variety of other tools that they're building out of the use of the system, so that the more people that use the system, the better the system gets, rather than trying to get it right the first time with a top-down hierarchy. It's really powerful. Let me show you another example of this tagging, that is the experience that people have as the architecture emergent from that experience, which is Flickr. Flickr, the photo sharing website, and Cal Henderson is here. He's going to talk later about how he built that with the team as they sort of started with a variety of different directions, sort of honed in on photo sharing, and did so using the same sort of tagging system that we've seen in Delicious, right? The emergent architecture, right? So here's the login screen. I get there. There's my photos, some photos from my contacts, things like that. I go to one of my particular photo pages, and this is there's a funny story behind this photo. I have this. I'm going to share a little personal information. I hope you don't mind. I'm terrified of lizards. I don't know why. It's inexplicable. Sorry. But I am. And so one day I'm in South Park, just a few blocks over by our office, and there's this giant 4-foot lizard sitting in the park sunning himself alone. And I'm like, what's going on with the lizard? And so I see this guy over there, and I'm like, is that your lizard? He's like, yeah. I'm like, so all right, I'm going to face my fears. I'm like, can I take a photo of your lizard? He's like, absolutely. So I walk up with my camera, and I get up right in front of the lizard, and I'm just about to snap this photo that you see here, and the lizard sneezes. Well, I'm about 6 inches from him, and I must have jumped 4 or 5 feet in the air and started crying a little bit. Absolutely terrified. Anyway, I got over it. I came back. I took the photo of the lizard, and there it is. But I've tagged this, right? And so here you can see the tags that I've put on my Flickr photo of the iguana. We've got iguana and lizard and sneeze and nemesis, of course. So what's really interesting here is the same thing that was interesting in Delicious, right? I am tagging the stuff that I make in a variety of ways that make sense to me and me alone. But I can click in front of each one of those little icons, this little fuzzy here, is a globe. Global view of that, right? So I can click in on lizard, and I can see not just photos that people have tagged lizard, but clusters of ideas around lizards based on a bunch of hard back-end work that maybe Cal will tell us about in a couple hours. This is a remarkable screen to me. Not just from its usability, from its functionality that, oh, neat, I can go look, lizards in Mexico. Yeah, of course. And lizards and geckos. Oh, look, more specific. But this is an architecture that's being built out of emergent behavior, which means that Flickr spends its time developing an architecture as a series of hints, as a series of connections, of coincidences, and nothing more, right? And we can see that here when we look at the tags, the hot tags for the last 24 hours, Burger King and mountain biking. Who knows why? But it's fascinating to explore that and see the connections with your own stuff. And the all-time most popular, you see what people do with camera phones, right? They go to parties and they have birthdays and they go to the beach and they take a lot of pictures of flowers, apparently. They've created an architecture, a fuzzy, messy human architecture based on what people are doing there. So different from our traditional sort of top-down hierarchy, right? Where we're going to organize our website and people are going to find that organization. They're going to be able to find their way down to the thing they're looking for. But that thing that they're looking for, right, we don't know what those connections are going to be. We could guess at some, especially if we do some usability and we understand our audience. Like, oh, the people who like lizards tend to also click on Mexico, so let's make that connection, and let's also make the connection to green, because lizards are often green, and that makes sense in our taxonomy, in our hierarchy. But how are you ever going to come up with something like that, right? That is something that emerges from the system. That is something we never could have guessed. It's a powerful way that we're starting to see sites reorganize themselves and re-architect themselves. All right, so let's talk a little bit briefly about scope and strategy in the few minutes that we have left. Scope, as I explained earlier, is the stuff we decide to do. And I'm just going to look at this very briefly in the notion of Web 2.0 that I see over and over again, sites, services, applications, re-scoping themselves much more narrowly. So one way that we can define how this is happening at the more abstract level of our sites is that we're taking old problems that have been around forever. Who would have thought that innovation would have happened first in maps and in email? two problems we thought were solved 6, 8 years ago with Hotmail and MapQuest. Who would have thought that that's where the innovation would have come? So there's a lot of old problems at the web that people think are kind of solved good enough that are getting a tremendous amount of new life from this new platform, this slate of technologies that have sort of come up to the surface recently that are helping us sort of reevaluate what's happening. And lots of participation. How would Flickr work without participation? How would Delicious work without users investing in the application? The more people who use it, the better it gets. I'm just going to show you a few examples of that. Here's an old problem, content management systems. This is a screenshot. I'm not going to walk through this. This is a screenshot from a presentation I've given in the past, a full-day workshop on how to get ready to change your static website into a dynamic website using a content management system. Not how to do it, how to get ready for it. What an incredibly complicated process it was. Look at all the stuff you got to do just to decide whether or not you need a content management system. Content management systems require complex solutions, right? It's really, really difficult to take really large websites full of all kinds of data and control them in one interface, and frankly, getting it right the first time. Here's a screenshot from an older version of Vignette where we can see that our person here is logged in, can create new workflows and manage the taxonomy and do all that kind of stuff. Turns out that if you can redefine the problem as something simple, you might be able to use a tool as simple as this. This is just TypePad. This is a blogging tool. You take all that complexity and replace it by constraining what you can and can't do, but giving access to everybody. And I've seen time and time again simple solutions by redefining the problem being much, much more effective. Now, of course, I mean, if you've got a giant website, if you're some huge organizations, you're not going to replace everything with a simple blog. But you can solve many, many problems, especially, like, think about your intranet. Like, just give everybody access to a blog and let them post what they're doing, and then have them create categories as they emerge and see what happens, right? Rather than this giant portal system that's going to take us, 18 months to implement. It won't solve all the problems, but it'll solve many of them. It's that 80% solution that's so simple with free software and tools that people are already used to using that changes so much. And then the layer of participation. Look what blogging did, right? By trying to fix some of the fundamental problems of content management, stuff starts to emerge that we never would have thought of. The Hype Machine is such a great example. Every band in the world right now puts 2 or 3 songs on their website. They got it, right? They got to put a couple of free songs that people download and listen to them, decide to go to the show or buy the CD. So every band is putting a few songs as MP3s on their website. Blogs sprung up immediately. There's thousands and thousands of blogs that are pointing to the individual MP3 files, saying, like, look at this one is great. And they all have different themes and different genres of music, and it's really a remarkable way to discover music. And then an application like this comes and lays down on top of that and aggregates the blogs that are aggregating the music. And puts services on top of that for things like, want to listen to this in Winamp or in iTunes, to put a stream of all the new stuff that has shown up on some of the blogs, and you get to choose the blogs. And it's remarkable. It is what Tim Berners-Lee was talking about when he was referencing the semantic web, although this is probably with the lowercase s than the uppercase s that he would prefer. This is emerging behavior coming from people posting structured data on the web by simply trying to solve a very difficult problem of content management in a much simpler way. It's absolutely remarkable. I mean, Maps is a classic example. The old problem of Maps was that Maps were a search engine, right? You would search for a location, and it would provide you a result. And if the result wasn't what you were looking for, you'd search for another location that would provide you a result. Who would have thought that that's where the innovation came from? When Google decided to use some of the technology that they've been playing with Google Earth, add a layer of this Ajax JavaScript-y goodness, let us zoom right in on, everybody look up and smile, right? Zoom right into the location, pan around where we want to go. Anticipatory navigation, that is, it's loading map as fast as it can around the circle, so as you scroll, it's a seamless experience. That's pretty remarkable. That's a new platform. And look at the participation that's happening there by saying that data is a starting point. Build stuff on top of that so that we can really be successful. Again, giving users control of their data. ChicagoCrime.org. Somebody's part-time experiment in their evenings after work. Some guy took open source data, right, the public domain data that comes out of the Chicago Police Department in a structured way, took that data, the crimes that were happening in that city, and stuck them on top of an open API for Maps, and created an application where nothing existed before that turns into participatory journalism at some level. So here is Zooming in on your neighborhood and seeing that there was a armed robbery around the corner. Oh my God, that's powerful. Could some guy in his spare time have built a satellite view that pans and scrolls and zooms in? No. But somebody took this data, made it much more accessible through the techniques that we've been talking about all day, and put that up online using completely open connections between the data and the interface and different data sets. Absolutely remarkable. Let me show you one more example. This is something that I've been working on for the last year or so, which is web analytics. The old problem with web analytics was that every site is different. Every site is relatively complex and has its own problems, and every tool tried to solve those problems, making those tools themselves very complex. So maybe there would be a way that we could sort of narrow down that problem and make a tool that solved the problem in a much simpler way. And that's the work that I've been doing for a while. That's a little dark, I'm sorry. On a product called MeasureMap. MeasureMap is a web analytics tool, but it only works on blogs, which means we can make a ton of assumptions about the kind of website, use the kind of technologies, the information design, the new sort of Ajax-like interaction design. The thing I particularly like about the solution that we came up with here is that most people can't tell what's Flash and what's Ajax and what's HTML, and it's just we're kind of agnostic about technologies. Use the best that we could find of what was happening in the Web 2.0 world and kind of merge them together to solve a problem much more simply than it had been solved in the past. Again, open APIs and connections to data leads to this level of participation. The instant we published to just a few people our open API for your blog stats, stuff started popping up immediately. Little dashboard widgets and things that you could stick onto your blog to show what's happening there. It's about letting go of control, right? Over and over again, it's about letting go of control, letting your users be peers and not be people you communicate at, because you have no idea what they're capable of and what they're going to be able to do. Let me give you one last example here. We're going to go into the strategy section and talk about, why we're on the web in the first place. I want to do that with a brief story. It's a very sort of dramatic image here. A while back, here in San Francisco, I walked out of the office to get a cup of coffee. I smelled smoke, like really bad smoke. And this was in the fall in San Francisco. And for those of you not from California, that means, well, you guys know this now, right? There was no rain for the whole summer because it doesn't rain here. And so that means like something huge is on fire, right? Happens every few years here. At one point, like I think it was in 94, 93, 2, I don't know, Oakland burned down. It was horrifying. It happens here cyclically. That it gets very dry and so I was like, oh my God, what's going on? So I went back inside, and I didn't think of going to a TV or turning on the radio. Of course, I went to the web. SF Gate was publishing stories from yesterday. Nothing there. So I don't know, one of the news stations here. Nope, local news. Man, I haven't watched local news on TV in so long that I completely forgot that it's nothing about, it's just crime, and something blew up. Like, all right, so nothing there. That's all from yesterday as well. So I switched to the blogs. I looked at Metafilter, couldn't find anything there. That's typically where I go to sort of hang out with a community of people. Nothing there yet. But on the East Bay blog, there was a comment on one of the posts about the weather saying, hey, anybody sell smoke? And another comment that said, yeah, I did. What's going on? But that was it. So all right, I'll leave that open in another window. And I went over to SFist, a local blog done by, they're not volunteers, but they're pretty close. A bunch of folks that are sort of building a series of local blogs. It started with Gothamist in New York. And it's kind of spread across the country, actually internationally now. And they had their top blog post, which was, there's a fire, but it's a controlled burn, and it's just like the weird inversion layer of how the wind is blowing, and that's why San Francisco, but don't worry, nothing else is on fire. It took traditional news sources hours to catch up with a bunch of bloggers. So what's going on here? Should I trust them? How did they get the story first? Why are they out ahead of everybody else? Why did I turn to them when I sort of was looking for what was happening in my life? It's a theme that I've been seeing sort of growing again, another one of those little sprouts out of the ashes of amortization, that is, an architecture of participation. Creating tools so powerful, yet so easy to use, that it fundamentally changes people's expectations of what they get from an organization. Here's a great example. A while back, an event happened in the world of blogs that the dean of the School of Journalism at Berkeley said was a landmark moment for the balance between the blogosphere and mainstream media. Remember what that was? It was a little while ago now. It was the memo that had come saying that George Bush had skipped out of service or something like that. Turns out it was totally faked. But Dan Rather and the CBS News went with it as a story and were taken apart by the blog world, which was basically a bunch of people with powerful yet accessible tools in their part-time as amateurs, right, attacking this problem and seeing what they could find. And it was pretty remarkable, right? Nancy Franklin wrote in the New Yorker that the internet, blogs in particular, played a more important and more active role in the story by immediately questioning the validity of the memos. And the result, pretty remarkable, right? Pretty much everybody resigned from the staff, and Dan Rather retired kind of ignominiously. What's the word? Thank you. Always count on Jim for the word. Anyway, what's going on there? Where do these powerful tools come from, and how are they changing things? I love this quote from Clay Shirky. Weblogs fix the inefficiencies traditional publishers are paid to overcome. Powerful tools put in the hands of people. And in a world where publishing is that efficient, it's no longer an activity that's worth paying for. Now, those are sort of revolutionary terms, but they're really powerful. Let me ask you guys a quick question. How many of you used a travel agent when you booked your travel to come here today? No, 1, 2 people. Internal? Somebody that worked for your organization? Yeah. We don't. Because there's powerful tools put in the hands of people that make that not worth paying for anymore. We can do it ourselves, usually more effectively, certainly with a lot less hassle and a lot cheaper. This is how we book travel now. And what Clay Shirky is suggesting is this is how we're going to be doing publishing now. And in fact, that's the model that we used when we started thinking about MeasureMap. Right? The world of blogs is making publishing so spread out, so diffuse, so many people doing it that there's no market there anymore. People don't get paid to write. I don't pay to read very much anymore. 10 years ago, almost every word that I read, I paid for to have come to me in some form. And now, 40%, 20% maybe, some of the magazine subscriptions, maybe I pick up a newspaper, we pay indirectly, but that's so diffuse now. I read so many sources through my aggregator or whatever, that I don't really pay that much to read, and people don't get paid that much to write anymore. So we created MeasureMap as a way to show that there is value in publishing, that you're making an effect, that you're connecting with people outside of the sort of realm of capitalism, right? That you're having an effect, that you have influence, and that possibly someday there might be a way for you to make a little income on this, but that's not the point. So that's what's happening with these powerful tools in the hands of individuals. Craigslist took away classified advertising from newspapers. And I used to be in the newspaper game, and the number of inches of classified ads was pretty connected to the number of inches of editorial that I would get. That was a steady flow of income that is now gone, that newspapers don't have anymore. They just don't, right? And they're not replicating it anywhere. Between Craigslist and eBay, people are connecting with each other rather than using the intermediary of a newspaper. Radical trust, right? Put these powerful tools in people's hands, and you get things like Wikipedia, which is a fascinating experiment on the validity of individuals creating history or recording history together. So many issues happening inside of there, so many issues, all issues that I am so glad we are facing now. A remarkable experiment going on there. What was that? Oh, sorry. Somebody's calling out. Want to see what else is being built? This is where Web 2.0 is really shining. The simple experiments that are happening everywhere. These are the powerful tools that are being put in people's hands to change the way that they're interacting not only with the web, but with the organizations behind them. It's absolutely remarkable the amount of stuff that's going on there. Literally taking the risk out of experimentation. I mean, servers are so cheap now. And when was the last time you paid for server software? And advertising happens on a cost per click through Google, through simple advertising by building an audience. All these things are taking out the risk, the financial risk of experimenting with an idea. And this is the output of that. This unbelievable amount of experimentation, of playing around with stuff that's happening out there. I don't expect many of these to succeed as businesses, but they are certainly pushing forward what we're doing now. So let's take a look at these again. The surface, the stuff on the screen, the first opportunity we have not only to build trust, but to connect people to their data, to let users know that they own their data. The skeleton is changing dramatically in how we build our web applications so that we can connect with people in ways we never thought possible. Likewise, the structure, right? Beyond the Ajax of the skeleton, the structure of the tagging and the different open architectures that people are creating based on the experiences that they're having and us making the connections with those experiences. The scope is narrowing constantly as we get more competitive in the Web 2.0 world and find out that big, huge problems can often be redefined and solved much simpler. And the strategy changing, our expectations as users changing dramatically as we sort of learn more and more about what the web is capable of and how we take apart a lot of the big organizations that sort of have historically broadcasted at us. So there's a lot, right? There's a lot that's going on. A lot of people think this is another bubble, another boom that's happening. It'll be followed by another bust. It may very well be. There's no way that we can tell. That's certainly how technology has worked. It's certainly how the economy has worked for so many years. So I don't know if we're going to get through this unscathed again. I certainly hope we do. I hope that the shoots that are coming out of the ashes of the last bubble we have are building us a foundation that we can use to build something a little more timeless this time, rather than the 9th pet store online. Because we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us. And you're going to see throughout the rest of this day that we have a tremendous amount to learn before we can sort of really embrace everything that's happening. But I think we have nothing but opportunity. Anyway, thank you so much for being such a great audience. I actually even managed to put the PDF online before I got on stage. So if you'd like a copy of that, it's all yours. It's under a Creative Commons license. Do whatever you want with it. Thanks again.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Jeff. Jeffrey Veen from Adaptive Path. Like I said, we were going to be hearing from Jeff for a half a day on Wednesday. Such great stuff. We ran just a few minutes late, so we're going to take an 11-minute break, and we will reconvene.
Not enough time to get to the bathroom.
That's really, it's not enough time to get to the bathroom unless you call a taxi. So we'll be back at 10:15 to continue. Thank you.
Nick, let's go ahead and test that. Nick, let's go ahead and test that, Nick.